President Lyndon B. Johnson and Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy shared a mutual hatred. This might be obvious enough by the nicknames each had for the other. Kennedy called Johnson Uncle Rufus, or Rufus Cornpone, in reference to his crude speech, lumbering posture, and lack of class. Johnson called Kennedy a grandstanding runt and a snot-nosed kid. For the good of the Democratic Party, they kept the drama behind the scenes, but to anyone around them, it was no secret. Kennedy was even gifted a voodoo doll of Johnson, which he happily stabbed with pins. At face value, it might be easy to blame it on the dynamic. Johnson had been Senate Majority Leader, called the second most powerful man in the country in the days of Eisenhower, and now he was Vice President, a notoriously useless role. Meanwhile, Robert Kennedy, who was nearly 2 decades younger, was Attorney General and the President's closest advisor, seemingly for no good reason other than he was the President's brother. But the hatred started much further back.
What your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
It appears as though something has happened in the motorcade route. Something, I repeat, has happened in the motorcade route.
Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
My brother need not be idealized or enlarged in death beyond what he was in life. To be remembered simply as a good and decent man who saw wrong and tried to right it, saw suffering and tried to heal it, saw war and tried to stop it.
Here we are, Tapestry. Welcome in, everybody. Welcome in. I've said before why I consider Tapestry and the threads. Let me explain again. But welcome in, everybody, from Rumble and from YouTube. If we lose YouTube tonight, I don't see any reason why we would. It's all over the place. But just because I'm on the skids with them anyway, if we lose that, please know that you can find us over on Rumble. It will be continued over there. And we're going to keep going. So I appreciate y'all being here. This one I have been looking at for a very long time, probably as long as quite a few people have been digging into this incident. Tapestry. Well, here's why. I've often thought of why some people research this and they follow through one avenue, and everything that's not fitting within that avenue they discard or they put aside. Rightfully so, in a lot of reasons. We have been dealing with over 60 years now of such a swamp of misinformation, disinformation, outright lies, cover-ups that were absolutely deliberate, without a doubt, not accidental or sloppy. This was intentional. Every movement, I believe, in this was intentional. I think this was also a big reason why people have a hard time wrapping their mind around such a cacophony of chaos and trying to see where the pieces fit. Now, I don't mean this in any way as a criticism towards people that are researching. I'm not. I appreciate every researcher, even people that, if they honestly went at it, that got it completely wrong and went off on one side. Hey, that's just where it led them. And there might be a piece of information in there that's worth holding on to, unless the person was doing it or hired to do it to write a book to throw everybody off. There's been many of those. There have been many documentaries that were specifically made to do just that. Plenty of movies. Like I said, countless books, many interviews. Disinformation being put out there. It's very hard to sift through this. But I've sat down with people like Mark Shaw, multiple conversations with him. A wonderful individual, extremely smart. Nobody could ever say he wasn't, and be honest. And he does. He took the avenue of going through with Dorothy Kilgallen, and he started with The Poison Patriarch, one of his first books, which was Senior, Joe Senior, the dad, and went that route, and then found Dorothy, the reporter who knew too much, and went in through that route through Jack Ruby, and of course New Orleans, and Carlos Marcello, who was in charge of the mob there in New Orleans. He definitely had some run-ins with Attorney General Bobby Kennedy Sr., and that's all documented. I believe Jim Garrison, the Attorney General there of New Orleans at the time, he touched on that in his investigations. So the idea is, when I speak to someone like that and they go down this route, and I would nudge them and go, yeah, but what about this over here? Because we know for a fact this happened. How does this connect into it? And at that point is when a lot of people that are taking this route would go, no, this is the route we're on. That doesn't matter. Or it doesn't have any relevance. This is how it went down. This is the gear I'm hanging on to. This is the gear in my machine that makes the whole thing go. This is my patch that I'm putting in the quilt. This pattern fits. This one can go next to it. It kind of matches what I'm going for. And I'm not saying they're doing that on purpose. It's just if you're looking at it and you're looking at things one way and something looks so far out that there's no way it can have a connection, that's when I have to say, I pause and I go, wait a minute, all these other things actually did happen and they're not mutually exclusive. So it seems like we have this patchwork quilt of a definite conspiracy. Conspiracy theorists are batting 1,000 in the past couple of years, and our tinfoil hats are turning into tinfoil crowns with big old jewels in them. I wish it wasn't true, but there was an absolute conspiracy to kill the President of the United States, November 22nd, 1963, on a pretty warm day in Dallas, right in front of everybody. So why is it important to get the patchwork quilt correct? I think it was meant for us to have so much problems. Of course it was, putting it together, and everybody sounding like a lunatic trying to say, no, 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 my guy shot him. No, 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 my guy did it. No, no, no. It was Oswald all by himself. Complete lunacy. It's been proven that it could not have been in many different ways. But it's so scattered to the winds, it's very hard to collect all those pieces back and put them back where they go. And it's almost like somebody broke a vase and you're trying to glue it back together, but somebody walked off with half the pieces and threw them, in the ocean. Good luck collecting all those pieces, right? Well, there have been a lot of dedicated people, and I've researched this for decades. And I mentioned some of them there: Jim Mars, DeGenio, so many wonderful people. Even Oliver Stone. I don't agree with everything Oliver Stone says, but his book is very good. And that's just it too. I mean, if somebody says, oh gosh, he wears blue socks, I hate blue, so I'm not going to believe anything he says. Well, does his facts add up? That's how I kind of look at it. So why a tapestry? I think a tapestry fits better because these are threads. These are threads that are connected. When you pull on one, you get to see where it was connected to. If you don't have an ultimate outcome at the end of that thread and you just take what it brings, or you look at it and see where it forms in the picture that is presenting this entire tapestry of a murder of a president. No one thread is less important than the other. It might take up more prominence in the picture, and they are not mutually exclusive from each other. They all happened. Where they connect, where they overlap. Some of them might have been threads that if you pulled it, you would still have the picture. But the thread was there for a reason. Maybe it passed a note. Maybe it was there to create a distraction. Maybe it was there for another reason. But I believe all the threads are important and stitched together, woven into this tapestry of a conspiracy fact over 60 years. Now, we've had a lot of developments come through with the JFK files, and I think it's wonderful that people fought to get those released. The first batch, of course, that was released was so redacted it wasn't even funny. It's gone through a lot of bumps and grinds, but now we're getting more than 80,000 files downloaded. This is going to take years to go over, not months, not weeks, not days. So I want to caution you too, if you're interested in this subject, please be cautious who you listen to. Please be careful of the clickbait. Please be careful of people that come out after an hour of these files being out and saying, okay, such and such did it, or this person did it, or this one did it by themselves. They were the sole contributor to this horrible day, and this is why. Even with AI, people are having a hard time going through these, trying to gather them. There's some wonderful people. Just Human on X, on Substack. You can follow him. He's doing a great job, great analysis. He's not going after it. He's just going over the documents. There are some other people out there doing the same. They just had the congressional hearing, which, again, I spoke on it last night. It was crazy, and I felt bad for the researchers that were there trying to get somewhere the next step in this. Oliver Stone was there in 92. This is not the first time a lot of these people have sat in Congress trying to just give us the truth, just release the papers, right? So it was rough watching that, but I was glad they got their day to say the things that they wanted to say. Not everybody was on that panel that could have or should have been there, but they had some good ones. As far as I believe their earnest search for the truth. So you have books like Bugliosi's book that came out that just tried to reiterate the one shooter, and that shooter being Oswald, and Ruby shot him because he didn't want Jackie to have to face the trial. She didn't want her to see her go through it. She had been through so much. The stuff that people said and bought back then is insane. But you also have to think about the times are different. I saw some things in the chat here about Jackie sure stood by her man and all that. All through the decades, I can't wrap my head around why people would put up with such nonsense. I mean, he was a womanizing, all over the place. She came in many times and saw 2 sets of small female footprints, and his running away from the pool, going into one, ditching into another room. He's not the only one that has gotten caught in the White House doing things. We all know that. He was that way. His father was that way. His the way they were raised, the things that their moms put up with. They saw these things. They were raised in this kind of Hyannisport, upper crust Catholic private school, all the best. This is how they were raised, and this is what they were used to. Jackie knew it going in. Jackie wasn't stupid. Jackie was from a family that was very similar. She was a journalist, a budding journalist. She was a photographer more than anything. She really enjoyed that, and that's one of the things that got them together. And I would say that the both families probably pushed at that, But here's the deal. When she was in the hospital having her child, he was off fooling around. Couldn't get a hold of him. And I can't see, I know she's gone through other stuff too, and I don't want to really go down that rabbit hole tonight, but I've got another one we're going to deep dive in. But you have to look at it at the times. These are not excuses. These are the times. This was a time when if there was a knock on the front door and the woman or the man of the house, the mother, father, whatever, who was in charge, opened the door, and men in suits handed them a plain white card with black writing on it that says, "We're from the FBI. We're commandeering your home to watch the people across the street, or we're taking your car, or we're going to use your phone," or whatever they said that they were going to do. People would not have hesitated for a moment to say, "It's our honor to do this for our country." They wouldn't even have hesitated. 60 years later, that's a whole different scenario. And there's a reason for that. And I believe it didn't, I don't want to say it started here, November 22nd, but for sure, like I told Jim Mars, a nation hit its knees that day, and we never really got up right. I think some other things started at that time that kind of brought us to this time we're in now. Thank goodness. That's a show for another time. Tonight, I want to concentrate on going back. If we, just like in the paranormal, when we reach back, we had a great show last night. I still can't wrap my mind around how that family took a bus, got left off at this vacation house or whatever it was that they were in. We're told that there was some problems. Don't go upstairs. The first thing they do is go upstairs, and then they spend a week there because they can't leave because they don't have a car. And the whole time I'm thinking there were entire companies of people who marched from, deep south all the way up into, Pennsylvania, for Pete's sake, and beyond. So, I mean, if that stuff was going on in that house, I'd have been, these boots are made for walking, baby. So, I don't know where you guys are right now on what you think happened November 22nd, 1963. I don't know if you believe that a lone man, um, Oswald, was on the 6th floor of the school book depository and all on his own shot and killed John F. Kennedy. I've had discussions with multiple people on this, and some will just, oh, this is just, that couldn't happen. That's kind of crazy. And, that's kind of reaching. No, no, no. The facts push right at it. I'm not leading anybody anywhere. The facts are drawing us. And that's what I'm going to try to stick to. Tapestry will be a series of shows. They won't be back to back to back because there's a lot of research in between each one. It'll probably take us most of spring and half of summer to get through them because there's so many. But if you are interested in this, it is my opinion that there are great places you can go and do deep research. Some of the people were mentioned in the intro that I made, the Threads intro. Mark Grobert and Hunley have a terrific show. It is called Untold American History. And that is on YouTube. It is free. I believe they are on Locals as well. There are a lot of documents there for free. Books, rare books that you cannot get anywhere else that Mark has bought. A lot of people pitch in so he can get certain books that are out of print or first printing, because something else about the JFK conspiracy is that if a book was printed like Mark Lane's first book, the second printing is different because they made him change it or they took out whole chapters. This has been one of the strictest cover-ups, I believe, in at least American history. And there's been a lot of them, but I think this one takes the cake. It certainly has had the most focus as far as the cover-ups, the holding back documents for national security. And you wonder, why are they still holding stuff after most people that would be involved in it are probably dead? There are a few people still alive, that's for sure. Boy, they sure beat the odds, I'll tell you that. You'll figure that out tonight. But not enough to cause all of this to be hidden from the American people all this time. So that's why everybody's glad that the files are coming out now for this, to help us see clearer the picture of this tapestry that are put together with all these threads. And if you continue to look at it like that, I think you'll have a little easier way of absorbing the information, because if you're looking at it as threads, you can see some of these threads running parallel or crisscrossing, woven in together to create this picture. But we're not going to discard any unless it's absolutely proven that it was made up for this reason, or it's completely out of left field, and other people that are smarter and wiser than I am have said, that couldn't happen because of this, and we know this happened, so that throws that out. That makes sense to me. But by having a certain end game, and you come through and you say, okay, I'm going to prove that Oswald did it himself, and then you start throwing out everything else, well, that's kind of what they did from the beginning. And it might surprise you to know that they were already setting all this scene up as far back as September. And this happened in November. There are certain things that happened around there. How is that possible? How did they know that this was going to happen? I don't think they did. But here's the thing. These 3-letter agencies have people that they move around all the time, and they can use them like this because they've already got them set up. They've already got people out. I've heard as many as 3 to 5, even as much as 7 different Oswalds. Well, were there 7? No. These are just people. They said, go to the firing range, make act like you're shooting at the targets, and then make a little bit of a scene, stand out a little bit, So this one guy, he just reaches over and shoots another guy's target. And when there's a scuffle about it, and he's like, who are you? he says, "My name is Lee Harvey Oswald." And it doesn't look anything like him. It barely fits the description of Lee Harvey, but it's somebody heard the name. Hey, he was there at a firing range, just such and such at this point in time over here. So that proved this is what they do. So again, muddy the waters. Muddy the waters. We know that he had a lot of movement going around. He's been being watched since 1959. Of course he was being watched. He was working for them. A low-level patsy, just like he said. Somebody, now he didn't realize it. I doubt he realized it. He's just this guy that's doing what they say to do, and he thinks he's a big deal because they're giving him really important stuff to do, and he thinks it's important, and they're sending him to Russia and all this other stuff, and telling him to get he was doing a ground game, so they wanted to know from him, like, how do the trains run? How does this run? When do the planes take off? What's their busy time? All these like ground things about the Soviet Union. The whole thing with Marina, all of it, it's so wild when you start digging into it all. But when you realize that they have these people, I would say that they probably consider them throwaways, extras, and they don't know what the play is going to be yet, and they don't know what party's going to play, but they're already setting them up so they can move them around wherever they need them on the chessboard. Does this make sense? This is who I believe Lee Harvey Oswald was. That's why he was involved in this, and then over here into this, and over here into this. So we'll make all that much clearer down the line. What I'm going to do is use a lot of different people that I think have some really interesting facts to tell us. I'm going to point you off in other directions if you want to dig more. I highly recommend JFK Revisited. This was written by DiEugeno. Oliver Stone directed it, and this is their answer back to JFK through the Looking Glass was released, and then they got more information and found out more things, and then I believe released JFK Revisited. I believe that's the route it went. You can find more information out through. Let me share this with you if I can find it. I bet I can. Here we go. I'm going to start pushing buttons, guys. Seatbelt. The seatbelt light is on. Guys, if you, by any chance, if anybody sees that I get any kind of super chat over in Rumble, I don't always see it. They don't hold, it doesn't hold very long, and the chat for Rumble's over here till I can get the setup fixed. So just let me know in the StreamYard chat, which is the combined chat of both, but it does not show my Rumbles over here. So if somebody does that, I don't want to miss that in thanking them. So let me know, mods. Okay, I appreciate that. This one is okay. Where is it? So many things here. This is his. All right, I thought I had a link to it, but I don't. So DiEugeno's website is Kennedy's with an S and King.com. Kennedy's with an S and King.com. There are documents there. There are links to his books, links to his. There's a 25-part episode there of just going over one section of this. Oliver Stone calls him his researcher, which I think he's much more than that. But he is extremely smart in this. It doesn't seem like he has any. He's just telling the truth. And he was also on the panel at the congressional hearing the other day. The first movie that really started a lot of the spark was Oliver Stone's JFK. Very well done. That movie, well, I think it was a couple of people he leaned on, but basically a lot of that came from Crossfire, which is Jim Mars's book, Crossfire. And so a lot of JFK came from that. And that one stems on Jim Garrison's investigation into this via New Orleans. And of course, that is going to be with Clyde Bannister, Clay Shaw, which is the same person. You've got the crazy fairy character that was played by Joe Pesci in the movie, and so many others. And Oswald, is he there? What did he hang out? What did he, was he in the Cuban resistance? It's all this stuff. You had so much going on. You had Cuba, you had the Bay of Pigs, you had Israel trying to start a nuclear program. You had the Vietnam War. Kennedy wanted everybody pulled out of that. Bring the boys home. Let's go. When you realize that the military-industrial complex makes money on both sides of a war, and you realize they'll just about do anything to get it, you realize how important it is to have somebody that's standing between war and peace, that will not budge to money or bribery or blackmail or anything else to try to get this done. Because when Kennedy tried to stop it, they shot him in the head multiple times. And very, very weak people succumbed very quickly to the power and the push to cover that up. And some were caught between a rock and a hard place, seeing people around them have their lives destroyed or completely wiped out if they didn't. So some of these people found themselves in places they never planned to be, and others with power moved through it like it was water. And one of those people we're going to really focus on tonight. Like I said, the Eugenios is a great website to go to. I highly recommend the America's Untold Stories with Mark Grobert, somebody who's looked into this for a very long time. He too, not to diss him, but he's one of those people that if you mention something that, well, that's irrelevant. We're not even going to talk about Dorothy Kilgallen, or we're not going to talk. I don't even want to hear the story about Meatloaf. I'll tell you the story about Meatloaf. But I think all of it's important to at least hear through, because what if it turns out that there's a connection somewhere and it pops another piece into place? So I think it's important to keep all the threads. You can pull on the thread, but make sure you pull it back so you don't lose the picture. Because if we start pulling all the threads out that we don't like, pretty soon the picture is going to get murky again, and we can't let that happen. And we can't let people just jump to conclusions and start, oh, I solved it. I read 2-3 papers from the new JFK files, and I have it all figured out, and this is exactly how it went down. I think we need to be careful, because we're going to start doing what's been going on for 60 years. We're going to start distracting. We're going to start going back to that same churning of the chud, I want to say. It's just like it's like chumming for sharks. So there's a couple more out there. Definitely look into the Jim Garrison. We'll look into that later on down the line in another episode. But I like to go back to as close as we could get to the incident itself. Now, I don't mean by saying that just because we were listening to Walter Cronkite right after it all happened, that what Walter Cronkite is saying must be true. No, that story changed multiple times. There are stories behind the scenes of people that were there, how he worked up tears, that worked on the glasses and the whole thing to present this. Was he in? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that everybody had a damn agenda in this thing. And just because it happened right after doesn't mean it's solid gold. But I think the first version of Mark Lane's book, A Rush to Judgment, is that it? Don't quote me. We're gonna focus on more later, but this is just a run through off the top of my head. So I'm not saying that. I'm saying that some people got information out before they could get to it and take it away or tell them not to say it, talk about it. Okay. People weren't realizing, it's not like now everything is instant information. People were not realizing what was going on. Witnesses were sitting home wondering why they weren't being called and why they weren't being asked what happened. There was a few witnesses that were pulled in and spoken to, but that was because they were there and couldn't be ignored. So they brought them in and literally changed their testimony. Literally changed it or made up out of whole cloth their testimony, and it came back years later and they said, I never said that. Nobody even ever talked to me. Or, nobody was even writing anything down when they were talking to me. And now they're saying I said this doesn't make any sense. This happened all the time. Oh, yes. So the reason I think people are disappointed now or say there's a nothing burger or nothing came out in the JFK files is because everybody was waiting for the smoking gun. Everybody was waiting for the page to come out that said such and such did it, and this is how it was done, and this is who they hired, and this is where they stood, and this is how many times they shot, and this is how they went down. This is the person who said to do this. That comes from an investigation. There was no investigation into this crime. Not at the time. Everything was a deflection. Everything was a cover-up. Everything was find out what they know and tell them they don't know it and to shut up. If they don't shut up, do this. Take every camera. Keep all the evidence. There was no investigation. The Warren report was a joke. That was your official panel that was brought together to supposedly investigate. What they were doing was perpetrating a cover-up, in my opinion, and many others. And when you hear some of the stuff that went on in that panel, I think you'll agree with me. So there was no investigation. Therefore, there is no paperwork in there that says, okay, these are the people that this is who, we went and investigated. No, they just said that this is what happened. There were 3 wallets found. 3 wallets that were all supposed to belong to Oswald. How many wallets do you carry in one day? Right? Often people say we forget. And this is one thing that gets to me, is people forget a man died that day. It's so easy to say up and to the left, back and to the left, back and to the left, and watch that Zapruder film over and over again till you become so jaded to it. However many times he cheated on his wife, however many times he lied to Marilyn Monroe, however many times he did the things he did, somewhere in there was a human being that you heard in those speeches about a man that saw wrong and wanted to change it. He did not want the war. He wanted to go to space. He didn't want the nuclear buildup around the globe. He turned down horrible missions that were brought to him by creating false flags. Project Northwoods was nothing. They were going to take a full commercial jet filled with Americans and blow it up and blame it on Cuba, among other things. Kennedy said no. I don't care who he slept with. I know he had a bad back. He hurt it in the war. It was a PT-109. The things that man did. And we'll do a better breakdown on that because I think it's important to bring up. But he swam with a broken back with a brother on his that couldn't swim. Not to one island, but to 2. Wrote a note on a coconut, tried to get help. I mean, the stories of war are so amazing, and you wonder how people can pull themselves together. But this is how heroes are born. I don't think he ever really wanted to be president. That dad pushed those guys so much. He wanted his son Joe to be president, and he got killed in the war. So it fell on John. I'm not saying he didn't enjoy it, but man, this was something. So tonight, what we're going to do, I'm going to look through the chat. I'm going to get you everything you guys are saying, and then we're going to start by looking back at a documentary that was done a little bit closer to the time. I believe it was about 10, 15 years after. And it really does get to talk to some of the people that were there that didn't get spoken to, didn't get down on paper. There's a couple other good ones out there. And then I'd say jump to JFK. It's good. You should get a hold of that. It gives you a really good feeling of the clandestine secrecy and shadows of the whole thing, and how everybody moved, and who blackmailed who, and who pushed who in what direction, and how people were used and then thrown away. And once you get that feeling, you can kind of see how something like this could go down. JFK, the first movie, is very good for that. By the time you get to JFK, The Looking Glass, you're really starting to get it. And then JFK Revisited, very good. And catch some interviews with Mark Robert and DiEugenio and some other people who really have some deep information on this and are a little bit more fluid in their conversation and willing to talk to other people and say, well, that's a good theory, but that's been proven at such and such. And proven is a funny word. Let's talk a little bit about that before we get started. If somebody has a deathbed confession and says, I did it, I shot JFK, I was here, and I shot him, you have to take that into consideration and say, oh gosh, why would people lie so close to death? We always think that. I can't answer that. Is it impossible? No. So we can't just say, okay, this guy said he did it, so therefore we throw everything out. Remember what I said about threads? Okay. Then you have, again, the outright liars who just want attention. They just want to write a book. They just want to put something out there. Or maybe somebody paid them a little extra to say a little something, something else. That's in there. So what's proven and not proven? Just having somebody say that person has lied before, blah, 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 doesn't mean that they weren't telling the truth at one point in time. I've heard the craziest stuff about the morning of, where Oswald did this, this, and this. That's just been proven wrong. The people across the street that said he carried out the package, and they were disproven after the fact, that they were just told to lie. And later on down the line told somebody that, that was all bonkers. I was scared to death. I said what they told me to say. You have a little more tendency to believe that, but just somebody pointing at somebody and saying, look into it. We can't just throw a lot of this stuff around and call it fact if it's not. And we can't call it a lie if it isn't. So that's what makes this so difficult. So I'm going to present some theories. I'm going to present some evidence to you, and you guys help me discern through it. Tell me what you think. But I don't think anybody here tonight listening to me in this chat believes that Lee Harvey Oswald did it by himself. If you do, listen to this now. One of the things that came out in this last batch of files, I believe, I could be wrong, could have been the one right before. There's still stuff coming out, so it's not done yet. So anybody that's on a podcast saying, hey, I've looked at all the files and I've come to the conclusion, blah, 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 they're not all out yet. And again, I don't think there's going to be a smoking gun because there was no investigation. We've done the investigation for 60 years. We have people that have been looking into it, people that have been writing the books, people that have put their life on the line, pretty much fighting through all kinds of muck and mire and danger to try to get the word out. Those are the people that did the investigation, not the Warren report, not that committee, and not really anybody that was around. There was a few people that were fighting for it, but they didn't screech too long. Okay? So if you're thinking that Oswald did it by himself, he's on the 6th floor, supposedly, and JFK is shot. I think it was like 12, 24, 25. And Lee Harvey Oswald, there were 3 women on the stairs. And I don't have all the names right here in front of my head, but there were 3 women on the stairs. The 3 ran down when the I want to say parade, but that's not it. When the cars came through, when the president came through, and they wanted to come down the stairs to see what's going on. One lady stopped and she stayed on the 4th floor. The other 2 ran down. Now, supposedly, while they're on the stairs, this is when Oswald would have shot the president, laid all the bullets out, because there was 3 bullets like in a row, which is weird, the casings, hid the rifle, the supposed Mannlicher Carcano shitty gun, up there, and run down the stairs. Okay, sprint across, go across the floor, go down the stairs, and did not pass one of those women. And as the women are coming down, he's on the 2nd floor in the snack room having a Coke. How did he get there? He never passed them. So when you look at little things like that, when you look at the 6th floor book depository museum that's up there, all the boxes are moved, and they've got like a sniper's nest put up there, and there was supposedly a half-eaten chicken lunch and some other things, and then of course the 3 bullets lined up, and he had time to do all this and run down the stairs past those women without them seeing him. Well, some guy, I forget his name, but we'll bring it up later, terrible with names, is sitting up there having lunch, and they grilled him and grilled him and grilled him, and they kept trying to get him to change the time. And how long? When did he leave? No, it was right about then. So supposedly, Lee Harvey Oswald, weapon in hand, is hiding behind something, waiting for this guy to finish his lunch. Just as the parade cars are going by and the president's car is going by, the guy must have got up, left, didn't see Oswald. Oswald runs in, has time to set up this whole sniper's nest, aim, shoot 3 rounds into the president, hide the gun, and get downstairs past 3 women that are on the only stairs down without them seeing him. And that guy did not leave till the president was already passing by. Couldn't have been done. How did they pull it off? They just omitted some people. They didn't allow their testimonies into it. And now you're starting to see some of them. You even have in those documents, there is a ambassador who's speaking, who's Underhill, and he's telling of what's going to happen weeks before it happens. You better warn them. This is going to happen. This happens so many times. Other countries will hear it through the scuttlebutt, through whatever they're picking it up through, MI6 or Five Eyes, if you want to call it, where everybody's spying on everybody. Right down to the point where they said Lee Harvey Oswald's going to do it and he's going to be killed. So, when you're looking at all this, take into consideration these things and understand that they use people like this that are easy to manipulate. They keep them busy, and they use them when they need to, and then they're done. Sirhan was another, in my opinion, and multiple other ones. Timothy McVeigh, another one, in my opinion. There are meetings that people had where they were asked to join Timothy McVeigh. Turned it down. No, I ain't doing that. That's crazy. Setups. When you realize that people do this, it changes everything. So what we will do, and again, if we get tossed off, please just join us on Rumble, and it is what it is, right? I want to look at the chat before we do this. Okay. So I pulled. Now, our FBI director currently is Kash Patel. I happen to love Kash. I've been following him for years. I love his style. I get what he's doing now. Let him cook. But months ago, I think this might have even been last year, he sat down with Glenn Beck, and he had a little conversation, and I thought it was interesting because the minute I heard him say this, I went, okay, I know what's going to be in him. I understand. Let's see if you do.
I never believed that the CIA killed Kennedy.
No. You're talking to a guy that's read the entire JFK file.
You've seen all the secret stuff?
I've seen all of that, and I've seen the 7 pages of the 9/11 report. I've seen it all.
You don't say that to people that you can't tell what you saw. Should the Kennedy stuff be released?
Yes.
Is there anything there that is like, is anybody alive?
The problem is the things that we can't release have nothing to do with the questions you guys are asking. That's about as far as I can go on it. But like the answers you guys want, pretty much have them. There's very minimal stuff that can't be seen for things that you wouldn't even think are related to that.
Why can't we release them?
And you're thinking temporally, like, did it stop back then? Right? You know, the way intelligence works is you're always developing it. Where did I get that? Where did that go? Oh, hey, I found that guy 5 years ago. Let's go talk to him. Where does that get us? You know, it's a little bit bigger of a jigsaw puzzle. I mean, it's the same. Look, so the 7 pages of the 9/11 report, yes, overnight, that needs to come out. I'm telling you, that's got to go. And there will be some people that are pissed off.
Oh, yeah. There would be some people that are pissed off, especially that one, the 9/11. But totally different episode. So what do I think Cash meant by that? Motorcade. Thank you, Cat. Oh, that's the word I was looking for. Thank you, darling. Appreciate you. So what I believe Cash was saying, that it's bigger than us. It's bigger than all of us. And it's still going on. That's the smoking gun. That's the smoking freaking loose cannon called power. When you have, this is what Eisenhower was warning us of in his famous speech about the military-industrial complex. This is why we needed somebody to come in here that was a businessman, that had money that couldn't be bought, that hadn't done anything in his past that could be used against him, and that was not interested in their bullshit. Just saving a country, plain and simple. In a lot of ways, very similar to Kennedy. Do you notice any parallels? Has there been anything recently that maybe had a little flavor, a little stench that seems similar? I give you Butler, PA. Because the parallels between Butler, PA and what happened November 22nd, 1963, I saw it like that. Right after the initial shock of hearing about it, I think I heard about it 20 minutes after it happened. It was a Saturday, I believe, or a Sunday. And I started looking into it, and I'm going to all my connections, and we're trying to sort it out. And let's see what happens here. Oh, if that happens, oh, this is looking familiar to me, because it's still going on. Thing is I think they hit a little bit of a wall this time. Thank goodness. But when you look back at how things were handled It blows your mind. And for years, I've heard there's no way that many people could hold a secret. Oh, yes, they can. If they're afraid for their lives, they can. And they're professional hitmen that you never hear about it. There's a few that come out and, at the end, they want to give a deathbed confession or write their memoirs or something else, or they leave them with the kid and the kid comes out with it and tries to do something with it, writes a book, whatever. But the ones you don't hear of, those are the real good ones. So were any of those involved? I would say yes. And I would say that you don't have to, not that many people have to be in on a conspiracy to know that they're in a conspiracy or have a clue what they're doing, because everything is so compartmentalized. You literally don't know what the guy next to you is doing or why, let alone anybody in the next room or the next city. How many people here know that during that same year that JFK was killed, there were 2 other attempts on his life, one in Miami and one in Chicago? The one in Chicago was thwarted because in a boarding house, a landlady went into a room and saw sniper rifles on the bed, while the 2 Nova brothers were out, supposedly them, were out having lunch, and she called the police, and they had to leave everything there and take off. The one in Miami was handled so well by the police and the Secret Service that was there that Kennedy actually stayed over so he could shake the hands of, I think it was like 120 people that were involved with saving him that day. You don't ever hear about it. It was mentioned in the congressional hearing by D. Eugenio, I believe. So let's see if I can get a piece of that. That's what he said was very important. He said that it was important that if we had had those documents then, if they had been released then, we may have been able to prevent what happened in Dallas. What does that tell you? But the people who had those documents and had that information didn't want to release it because they didn't want to stop what was going on in Dallas. And we're going to look into why. All right, let me take a look here what y'all are saying. There wasn't supposed to be public access to that floor either, I believe, if I remember it. Oh, you mean on the 6th floor? I think it was just people that were working there, correct. But I don't want to put that one in writing. I'm not 100% sure on that. I don't want to say anything I'm sure on something tonight that I'm not. But I can look into it, and we might find it along the way, Kat. So definitely hold that. If anybody's got questions too, they might get answered tonight. They might get answered down the line in this episode series. But I think it'd be interesting if we throw our questions out there and we see if we can get them answered. You're watching Agenda Free LO when Trump got shot. Oh, really? Yeah, I'm telling you. Did you know that day was the only day that CNN ever played a rally live? Only time. When he was first running, the first time was elected, all the way through. You can check me on that one. But that day they were going live. And they told the photographer, make sure you've got that fast film in your camera. Get up close. Now, was the cameraman in on it? Did he know? Or did he just take his fast film and figured they wanted really good shots? I don't know. But I know that happened. They wanted you to see, just like JFK. They wanted to be all over everywhere. And who in CNN did that? Did they get a call? Do they know why they said it? Again, it's hard to imagine what's in people's heads. But it looks pretty fishy. I, for one, am really glad they didn't get their show. Let's see. Lee Harvey Oswald, the man accused of assassinating President John F. Kennedy, was fatally shot and killed by Jack Ruby, a Dallas nightclub owner, in the basement of the Dallas police station. Dallas police station on November 25th, 1963, 2 days after assassination. Here is... Does that continue? Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for the crime and charged with the murder of President Kennedy and murder of police officer J.D. Tippit. Yeah, which was that's a whole nother story. All right. So does anybody have, I'm going to go back up through because I just want to make sure this is important. This is for all of us. This is everybody's questions, everybody's thoughts. Are some of these folks from back then still alive? Yes, some of them are. Not very many, but some of them are. I believe actually one of the ladies on the stairs. You can read about that too in the book. I forget who wrote it, but it's called The Girl on the Stairs. That's a really good story on a novel on the girls on the stairs, but also in the documents that were just released. One of them is alive. The other two are passed. Thank you. Yes. We are simulcasting. Thank you. Thank you. Motorcade. We got that. That was great. More than one staircase. No, one staircase. Good question, Henry. Poor Jackie. Climbing on the back limit to get somebody. Yeah. I mean, she was just reacting. She didn't realize she had a piece of it in her hand. I can't believe when Clint Hill jumped on the back there. That was just awful what she went through. And then afterwards too. Just terrible. The grassy knoll, exactly. And, the puff of smoke and everybody running up there and people saying, I think there was probably between 7 and 9 shots that day. Mostly, I'm comfortable in saying that. I mean, you can ask some experts, they'll say 6, they'll say 7, they'll say, but from what I understand where I'm at today, somewhere around in that area. Because there's like a chip in, there's a shot taken out of one of the curbs. There was a shot taken to the sign. There was somebody else hit by a ricochet and got hurt in the face. And then don't forget the magic bullet with Connolly and all that. That's crazy. What is it? C339 or something it's called, the magic bullet. Nuts. And people bought that. It's crazy. Eisenhower tried to warn military. Yep, back in the 50s, sure did. I'll never forget the headline newspaper when Oswald getting shot by Ruby with his mouth in a circle. Yeah, absolutely. Never trust your life to any of the alphabet organizations. Amen to that, sweetie. Got to have plenty of pawns. Yep, you sure do. Plenty of pawns to move around that board. We've all been pawns in our own way, haven't we, sweetie? I wonder if he was a Manchurian candidate. I don't think so, Lisa, and I'll tell you why. I would say Sirhan, yes. I would say for many reasons. I would say, where's another good example? The one that shot Reagan. He's out now. Oh gosh, what's his name? He kind of fit the bill. He was reading Catcher in the Rye. I don't even think he got a shot off. I mean, I think he was. It's those ones that show up and they don't know why they're there and they really don't remember much afterwards. And it's kind of like they've come out of being hypnotized kind of thing. Sirhan definitely fits that one. I think he was activated by the girl in the polka dot dress going into the restaurant there, but into the kitchen. But that's another episode. Never believed the magic bullet either. BS either. Oh, who could? I mean, what kind of crazy shit is that? I mean, maybe I can get a clip of Kevin Costner explaining that as Jim Garrison in the courtroom that day, where he's tossing that thing. It's had to spin around and then it shot back up and then it went down and then it went through this and it came out. Crazy. And there was more than one bullet found in the hospital that day at Parkland too. Just wouldn't look. And if you ever shot a gun, you know that bullets don't come out looking like that. Believe Oswald was alone. Too many people disappeared. Exactly. Let's see what else we got. Hello. Scott's life. Okay, I think I got them all. If you have any other questions along the line, if I don't see them, please mods put them out. John Hinckley, thank you, sweetie. Hinckley, thank you, Henry. Yep. See, you guys are so good at this. All right, here we go. Middle Road, Texas governor. Oh, what's this? Pictures? The pictures? Presidential limousine. Oh, okay. This is good. The presidential limousine in which John F. Kennedy was riding when he was assassinated contained 3 rows of seats. That's true. First row, Secret Service. Agent Roy H. Kellerman sat in the front passenger seat. Middle row, Texas Governor John Connally and his wife. Nellie Conley sat in the middle row, back row. President Kennedy and his wife, Jacqueline Kennedy, sat in the back row. True. And there's also Bill Cooper, who I love dearly for all the things he did, was the one that had the piece of film where it looked like the driver turned around and shot him. Here's why. I have, first of all, he could have, I don't know, but it doesn't take away from the fact that all this other stuff went around too. Also, what's the chain of custody on the film? Not 100% on that one. Don't know. I'm not even sure about the chain of custody. In fact, I'm less sure of the chain of custody on the Zapruder film. There's lots of frames missing. There's the autopsy pictures were changed. The photographer that supposedly took those says, look, that's not even the film I used. So many things got changed here. So it's almost like you have to throw everything out and just start building from the middle out. It's crazy, It's really crazy how you have to do it. It's a miracle no one else was shot. There was a couple hit, you just don't hear about it. No problem, sweetheart. Just glad you're here. All right, so let's get started on this. Like Cash said, it's still going on because these agencies got so much power and so much craziness and so much vindictiveness to it too. Here recently, we've heard a lot about USAID. And I don't call it USAID because it's kind of a misnomer at this point. The reason it was called that is because John F. Kennedy started USAID, and it was meant to be aid to other countries who were underdeveloped that needed assistance. And that's what he wanted to do with it. After he was killed, it didn't take them long to absolutely bastardize that entire organization and use it as a tool for money laundering, and color revolutions in multiple countries over decades. And it was just their way. Probably when it started later on, people probably didn't even realize it. But when they first started to do that, it was fresh after Kennedy was killed. And it was another way of that agency to just twist that knife in Kennedy. It's like, we're going to use this and we're going to use it to do all the things you didn't want us to do. And they got away with it for a long time. Somebody came along and yanked it right up from under them. And they're still pulling. It's an amazing thing to watch. So, what are we going to delve into first? This little ditty right here is one of the best breakdowns early. I believe it was... Oh gosh, what year was this one? No, that's not it. Hang on, guys. All this stuff is mushed together. So many tabs open. Schlesinger memo. Okay. I can see it. I just can't get to it. I think this is it. Yep, this is it. So this is Kennedy assassination. It is their take on how they believe that Lyndon Johnson was the perpetrator in this. Now, this is what I want to say. I do believe this. Very little doubt in my mind. It is a very important thread. But because we're saying he did this, does not mean that others were not involved doing the same thing at the same time. On purpose, to create confusion, and because why stop it? If you're there and you know you're going to pull something, and you know that there's a group being hired by such and such coming over from somewhere to do the same thing, why would you stop it? If they're not going to get in your way and they're not going to hinder you, it's just more to the party, right? That's my thought, my theory. You can tell me what you think in the chat. But here we go. We're going to watch a little bit of this and talk about it because I think this is very well done. And I want to say it was early, maybe 80s. This came out, maybe as late as early 90s, but it's definitely older than some of the stuff that's out there. And I think it's very well done. And they only allowed it to be on one time and then took it off and wouldn't allow it be back on again. It's just recently coming back around. So there's a reason they don't want it on. So let's take a look and see why.
Meet the new standard in sleep. This is Pod 4 Ultra. It's not a bed, it's a...
And I'm the head of the Secret Service. I ran on the cover-up.
I'd like the entire world to know how I personally feel is the fact Lyndon Johnson knew about the assassination and was a part of it.
Deep in the heart of Texas lie buried some of the darkest and most well-kept secrets that tell us who killed John F. Kennedy in Dallas on November 22nd, 1963, and why. Those forces of darkness revolved around one of that state's most famous political sons, Lyndon Baines Johnson. Born in 1908, he grew up in a comfortable middle-class home in Johnson City. At an early age, Lyndon showed a keen interest in politics. From the beginning, he was driven by a determination to win, whatever the cost.
In a word, he was ruthless. There wasn't anything he wouldn't do to get what he wanted, regardless of what it was. And probably the best example would be in 1948 when he was running for the Senate. And he was running against a man named Coke Stevenson. And the election was very, very close, a very small number of votes, which forced a recount. And once they did the recount, they found out a 201 vote error in a little place called Alice, Texas. And eventually they found out that the 201 votes had been added, one for Stevenson, 200 for LBJ. As a result, he won by 87 votes, and he was nicknamed Landslide Lyndon.
But the real name, the name used in the backwards, it didn't appear in the newspapers, was Lion Lyndon. And that stuck with him the rest of his life.
That rigged ballot became the template for a political career based on bribery and corruption. The full extent of Johnson's criminal activity only began to unravel 11 years after his death. In 1984, at this courthouse in Franklin, Texas, a former Johnson business associate, Billy Celestes, appeared before a grand jury.
According to Billy Celestes, there were 8 murders perpetrated on the part of Lyndon Johnson. The first name was a man named Douglas Kinzer. That was followed by a number of men involved in Estes businesses who were corrupt, and they were all killed with carbon monoxide. Josepha Johnson's name is listed on this Justice Department document. That's Lyndon Johnson's sister. So Estes is accusing the Vice President of the United States of murdering his own sister. And the 8th name listed is the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy. And then there is a promise of knowing more. And if Billy Celestes is telling the truth, and there's every reason to believe he is, it gives you an idea of the depth of the corruption and the ruthlessness of Lyndon Johnson.
According to Estes' written testimony, that murderous cycle began in 1951 in Austin, Texas, at this downtown golf course known as Butler's Pitch and Putt. The killer was a Johnson henchman called Malcolm Wallace.
Malcolm Wallace was born and raised in Texas. He was Texas bred, Texas educated, a very intelligent man. And when he graduated from the University of Texas, he was evidently recruited by Lyndon Johnson, and he was given a job at the Federal Department of Agriculture.
John Douglas Kinzer, the golf pro at Butler's Pitch and Putt, was having an affair with Wallace's wife and with Lyndon Johnson's sister.
Lyndon Johnson's sister, Josepha, was an alcoholic. She was a drug user. She was sexually promiscuous. She had loose lips. And who knows what she might tell Kinzer or others about Lyndon Johnson's political shenanigans.
Malcolm Wallace walked into the Pitch and Putt golf course in Austin, Texas, and shot to death in cold blood John Douglas Kinzer.
Kinzer died here for his indiscretions. Wallace was soon arrested and went on trial in Austin 3 months later.
First-degree murder, open and shut case. he gets a lawyer known as a Lyndon Johnson lawyer. So Lyndon Johnson is going to do his best to get his friend out of hot water.
During that trial, Lyndon Johnson took a room at a local hotel, and the 10 days that trial was going, constantly sent runners from the hotel to the courthouse to bring him word of what was going on during the trial. So he followed the pulse of the trial very, very carefully. Malcolm Wallace is found guilty of first-degree murder, but through influence of Lyndon Johnson, Malcolm Wallace receives a 5-year suspended sentence. Lyndon Johnson was able to get his man out of first-degree murder.
Much of the control Johnson exercised was acquired through an early alliance with a fellow Texan. Edward Clark gained unrivaled power in the late 1930s with a series of high positions in the state government. He became Johnson's lawyer and a formidable ally throughout his career.
The power Edward Clark exercised covered almost every avenue of government power in the state of Texas. He would make sure that important appointments were covered by his men. The judges' control was through their vote. I mean, he had their decision in the palm of his hand. And this was, of course, important because Austin was the capital of the state. And anything that happened legally went through Austin, and that meant it went through Clark. He was known as the secret boss of Texas. He could and did arrange for people to be killed. He arranged for money to be laundered. He had that control.
This building in downtown Austin became the headquarters of Edward Clark's all-powerful law firm. Barr McClellan was recruited as a young lawyer in 1966, 3 years after the assassination, unaware of the dark secrets hidden within. Soon after joining, in an after-hours conversation with John Coates, one of the firm's attorneys, Barr was made privy to an astonishing piece of information.
Coates and I started talking, and in the course of it, John told me, if the truth be told, Clark arranged the assassination of Kennedy. It was a kind of statement that you can't easily forget, even though I personally chose not to believe it at the time. It stuck with me. Attorneys know they're acting behind a privilege. They can say things to each other. And this talk would go on at after-hours drinks, at Christmas parties, just traveling on the road. And it was like Johnson had to get Kennedy out of the way. I worked closely with Don Thomas, and Thomas was the business attorney to the president and was the second man in the law firm. Thomas and I did a number of cases together, and we traveled the state because he did not fly. We'd been to Dallas one day shortly after I became partner, and it was driving back, and just out of the blue, it seems now, looking back, that Thomas said, "I am the only living man who knows what happened in Box 13. And we know what that meant. That was the stolen 1948 election. I didn't say anything. Sometimes it's best just to listen. And then he looked away and added, but Clark took care of things in Dallas. At that point, what I'd been hearing in the law firm, what John Coates had first told me, I knew was true, because this came from a man that was Johnson's business attorney, one of Johnson's most trusted confidants, a man who worked very closely with Johnson during his maturing years, his growing up years, so to speak, and as president. And when I heard that, there was no question that Clark had been behind the assassination, and he'd done it for Johnson. I know beyond a reasonable doubt that Johnson murdered Kennedy. He acted through Clark. He saw that it was done, And he did it out of a corruption of power that is unequaled in our history.
Now, just for a minute, I want to touch on something here. If you don't know about LBJ, now people, their museum will fight you, and everybody, here's the thing. It's enough. This man was so tied in to corruption that experts will tell you that if you ask people in Dallas who did it, that'd be the first name on their lips because they knew him. They knew the things he would do. There were people that were still scared of him after he died. He was on his way to jail for major, major crimes. Bobby Baker was they called him Little Lyndon. He was his gopher. He was his bagman. He was his guy, to go out there and get that done. Bobby Baker ran a little strip mall motel, and they packed it full of hookers, and that's where everybody would go, and they would get all kind of dirt on them and blackmail. And guess who? I'm going to give you a minute because there's a delay. Guess who was Lyndon Johnson's best buddy and next door neighbor and partner in crime? I'll give you a hint, his name was Bulldog. All of these people come together for the same things, to cover each other's butt and their own. And if this hadn't happened to Kennedy, Lyndon would have probably gone to jail. It was that big of a case. We'll get into it later on down the line. But everybody around him knew. You are going to hear something in this that's going to surprise you, as far as something that's almost been said kind of offhanded like a joke, as far as how someone could be deemed a suicide under such crazy details. And you're going to hear that, and that was a Lyndon as well. He would absolutely take down anybody that was in his way. When he was asked to be vice president, which is something that I've come to believe that JFK never wanted, and he never thought that Lyndon would accept. When he called up and asked him to be his vice president, he expected him to say no. Lyndon said, 1 minute. He put Kennedy on hold, and he asked Bobby Baker, he says, I want to know right now, how many presidents have died while in office? I'm not joking. I can back this up. How many presidents have died in office? And Bobby Baker's like, what? And he says, no, I want to know right now. Go find out. Meanwhile, his phone call's on hold. Bobby Baker goes and finds out. He says 17. It's been 17 years or something along those lines. He said, this is the amount of presidents that have died in office. And he said, it happens, I think he said, like almost like every 17 years. And it's been like 16 or 15 or something along those lines. And Johnson looks at Bobby Baker, and there was witnesses to this, and said, I like those odds. And he takes the phone call off a hold. He said, I accept. Bobby was absolutely beside himself. He was losing his mind when he found out about this. And he goes down to the Oval Office, and he's screaming and yelling and had a fit. And there was witnesses to that too. You can't have that son of a bitch on a ticket. The things that went down between these people, this is why I put this in the beginning, that there was such a rival between he and Lyndon and Bobby, as well as John F. Kennedy. They came from different worlds. They really did. And I think that's one thing that really upset Lyndon a lot, is because he wasn't that hybrid, college degree, fit into their Hyannisport cookie cutter persona. And he was a terrible drunkard. even though he could drink and you wouldn't even tell. He might slur his words a little bit, but that man could drink. I think he put like a bottle and a half of Cutty Sark a day down. He was a terrible glutton. He ate like, it's bad habits that way. He was an absolute pig. He used to run around the White House with his, cash and prizes hanging out and screaming to everybody. He had a name for it. He called it Jumbo, and he would walk up to everybody and have them pull theirs out so he could make sure he had the largest. He would go around calling all of the help in the White House, screaming at the top of his lungs, the N-word and all this other stuff, just demeaning people. He was horrible. He used people as footstools. He used to sit in the bathroom in the morning on the toilet and make his cabinet members stand in the bathroom with him as he gave out instructions for the day, just so he could have control and demean them and control them. As Scott mentioned in here, if you were a guest in his home, whether it was on the ranch in Dallas or whether it was at the White House afterwards, if you stayed in his house, he would always put the couples in different rooms, and he would go into the wife, throw back the covers and said, "This is your president, move over." It happened to multiple women. He chased reporters around the room, raped them, and dared them to say something about it. This man was horrible. Horrible. So once you realize the type of person he was, it's easy to see how he would fall into this pattern. And again, I don't think he was the only one. There's multiple things involved here. He's just one gear. He's a big gear, but he's definitely a gear. Okay, let's continue. This is really a good little documentary here.
You've been watching The Men. Welcome back to The Men Who Killed Kennedy, The Guilty Men. This program presents just one of the many theories about the death of John F. Kennedy.
After becoming a senator in 1948, Johnson developed an unrivaled power base in Washington, using his forceful personality, political skills, and corruption. He established himself as one of the most influential men in the nation, but as vice president to Kennedy, he lost much of that authority. By 1961, his past was catching up with him. In Texas, Henry Marshall, a local agricultural official, had begun investigating one of Johnson's illegal sources of funding. Working out of these offices in Bryan, Texas, Marshall had become aware of Billy Solesti's misappropriation of federal cotton allotment funds. Attempts to buy off Marshall had failed, and his investigations were beginning to threaten the vice president himself.
Billy Solestes became worried. Lyndon Johnson became worried. And some of them got together and decided, what are we going to do with Henry Marshall? So on one particular day, according to Billy Solestes, Cliff Carter, an aide to Lyndon Johnson, the vice president of the United States, and Malcolm Wallace got together. And finally, Lyndon made the statement, get rid of him.
On June the 3rd, 1961, Henry Marshall failed to return home. An extensive search was made of the family farm near Franklin, Texas. His only son, Don, was 11 years old at the time and remembers that day well.
My uncle found him on the second attempt when he went out to the place. He was in a very remote location, probably about 3/4 of a mile off the road. My mother had this stone placed here in order to mark the spot. The truck had blood around the sides of it. The side on the passenger side had a dent in the fender behind the passenger door, and that's apparently where my father's head was knocked into the side of the truck, and he had his eye damaged at that point. There were a number of yopon bushes that had been broken, and the gun was laying beside the body, and pretty much nothing else could be seen except signs of a struggle.
Local officials immediately ruled it a suicide, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary.
He had been shot 5 times with a bolt-action rifle. He had enough carbon monoxide in his lungs to cause him to pass out at the time he died.
Ridiculous.
There was no effort made to collect any evidence or preserve the crime scene. They had pretty much determined in their minds that this was going to be a suicide. When Billy Saul Estes testified before the grand jury in Franklin, he implicated Cliff Carter and Malcolm Wallace as the people that were most involved in my father's murder. Wallace being the trigger man and Cliff Carter being the one who arranged for the murder. I'm firmly convinced that Malcolm Wallace was the killer of my father. Who that would have aided, probably political power behind everything. Johnson would have been aided more than anyone else.
The grand jury concluded Henry Marshall in 1961 was murdered, which means in simple language that the grand jury believed Billy Saul Estes when he told them that Lyndon Johnson had ordered Malcolm Wallace to kill Henry Marshall.
But Johnson's dark dealings were not confined to Texas. In late summer 1963, one of his long-term partners in crime was about to be exposed for corruption by a Senate investigation.
Bobby Baker was the secretary to the Senate majority. Basically, he was the secretary for the Senate. And he was one of Lyndon Johnson's closest associates. And everything that Lyndon Johnson wanted to perpetrate, he had Bobby's help. Essentially, if somebody wanted to get a military contract and they wanted influence of Lyndon Johnson to help them, they had to pay off Bobby Baker, who would then pay off Lyndon Johnson. It's the world of bribes. Bobby Baker was involved in a call girl service. He was involved in real estate scams. He was involved in dealings with organized crime. He was in dealings with oil men, particularly Clint Murkison, an oil millionaire from Texas. So as a result of all this, Bobby Baker was in big trouble. And with a little bit of inspiration on the part of the Kennedys, if they could get Bobby Baker to talk, Lyndon was all done. Lyndon Baines Johnson, if Robert Kennedy had his way, would not only not be on the 1964 ticket as the vice presidential candidate, but he would go to jail for the corruption that he was involved with.
Although Johnson faced political extinction at the hands of the Kennedys, he had powerful allies with their own agendas that threatened the president, as researcher Gregory Burnham explains.
People would think that he had no enemies. He was so popular. He smiled. He appeared happy. Everyone loved him worldwide. But what people don't seem to understand is behind the scenes, he was making changes, and he was making them decisively. And he was taking some very, very daring steps. He was committed to pull out of Vietnam. By October, he had signed a document, NSAM 263, to that effect. 1,000 troops home by Christmas, and all personnel out of Vietnam by 1965. But that wasn't very good for the military-industrial complex. Is abolishing the Central Intelligence Agency, pulling their teeth, holding them to task, back to why they were originally created by Truman. Their original mandate by law is only to coordinate intelligence, not to create the Bay of Pigs. NSAM 55 told the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that the CIA no longer can do that, and any military operation has to come directly from them to the president, period. That kind of a document really causes problems.
But Texas was home to Kennedy's most dangerous opponents.
Oil millionaires and billionaires in Texas were petrified of one major factor that John F. Kennedy was considering, cutting the oil depletion allowance. And there was no way they were going to allow that. Essentially, they would save billions of dollars if it stays as it is. It was called a 27.5% oil depletion allowance. John Kennedy thought it was too liberal. One of the key men in this case is Clint Murkison. Clint Murkison is an oil millionaire, owned 500 companies, but he was primarily an oil millionaire. He also controlled Texas, controlled Johnson. His major means of operating and controlling people and influencing people was a little hotel called the Hotel Del Charro in La Jolla, California. It cost $100 a day in the 50s. And at that hotel, he would invite all these powerful, influential people. Richard Nixon would come there. Key lieutenants of Carlos Marcello, the head of the mafia in New Orleans, used to vacation there. J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, used to vacation there, free. Every summer for 10 summers, free.
Another Johnson man with close ties to Murchison was a wealthy Texan called D.H. Byrd.
D.H. Byrd was an underboss for Murchison. He was a Del Charro regular. He owned the Texas School Book Depository. He also founded the Civil Air Patrol, which was a kind of military organization, and Lee Harvey Oswald was a member of the Civil Air Patrol.
He owned the building.
Another associate of Murchison at the time is Bobby Baker. Bobby Baker's in trouble with the scandals, and he was in all kinds of business deals with Murchison, and many of them were illegal. So Murchison was concerned that Baker and that corruption would lead to his door. And maybe not only would Baker go to jail and Lyndon go to jail, but maybe Murchison would go to jail.
You've been watching The Men Who Killed Kennedy, the men who killed Kennedy, the guilty men. This program presents just one of the many theories about the death of John F. Kennedy.
Real quick, the answer to that question, who was Johnson's longtime neighbor and best buddy? None other than Herbert Hoover, the head of the FBI, his major thing was getting blackmail on people and keeping them in line and keeping them in control. And he did have an envelope on JFK. And you can better believe Marilyn was in some of those photos. Unbelievable, right? See how it all comes together? Okay. Here we go. Oh, wait a minute.
As the forces hostile to Kennedy grew in strength and number, they began to think the unthinkable: assassination. Finally, a new imperative forced their hand.
Lyndon Johnson was in big trouble. The Bobby Baker scandal and the Billy Celeste scandal could destroy Lyndon Johnson's career. Lyndon Johnson would go to jail, and he was their man. He represented all these right-wing forces. There was an urgency to kill President Kennedy. They had to save Lyndon Johnson. The governor of Texas, first of all, is Lyndon Johnson's best friend in history. They went back decades together. In the 1948 vote scandal, John Connally was every much a part of that cover-up that took place. He was his campaign manager. It is, without question, John Connally who entices John F. Kennedy to Texas. Once they get him there, then they're in control of everything. Motorcade routes, the evidence, the Dallas police, everything. It's their land. It's their territory. Lyndon Johnson and his Texas cronies suckered President Kennedy to Texas.
The late Madeleine Brown gained a unique insight into Johnson's role in Kennedy's assassination. She first met LBJ in 1948 at the Adolphus Hotel in downtown Dallas, when he was celebrating his election to the Senate following the infamous Box 13 scandal.
I went, I was very young, and it was wonderful. Our relationship developed immediately. Lyndon gave another campaign party in Austin. It was 3 weeks after I met him at the Adolphus, and it was scheduled at the Driscoll Hotel. And, it was so great to see him. I mean, for 3 weeks, I had thought about him and how wonderful it was. We were dancing that night, and he says, I'll see you upstairs. And he put a key in my hand. I still have that key. It was exciting. I felt naughty, but I felt good. I fell deeply in love with him. Yes, I did. I was just the other woman in his life, and my emotions are still the same for him as they were when I met him as a very young girl. But I'll always love him. He was the father of my son, Stephen.
That intimate relationship with Johnson continued for many years. Through him, she became familiar with the closed world of power politics in Texas. On the eve of Kennedy's assassination, she attended a party at this house in North Dallas, the family home of oil billionaire Clint Murchison Sr. There was an extraordinary guest list that night.
We had H.O. Hunt, Murchison, Lyndon Johnson made an appearance. We had Hoover. We had Richard Nixon. They were the most influential people there. But I was under the impression that since J. Edgar Hoover was there, that it was to honor Hoover rather than anything else. When Lyndon came in, no one was expecting him. So when Lyndon arrived at Clint Murchison's, they all went into a conference room, and you could just feel the atmosphere. And when Lyndon came out, I was, of course, happy to see him. I did not know that he was going to be there. And he whispered in my ear at that time, "Those blank-de-blank Kennedys will never embarrass me again. That's no threat, that's a promise." So he departed. The party rapidly broke up after Lyndon departed.
A seamstress and companion, May Newman, provides confirmation that this party took place at the Murchison family home on the eve of the assassination. She lived and worked in another Murchison house in Dallas for Virginia, Clint Sr.'s second wife. She speaks here for the first time.
I started working for Virginia Murchison in 1962 until her death in 1997, approximately 36 years. I remember well the night before the assassination. I worked with a man called Jewel Pfeiffer, black man, which was Virginia Murchison's chauffeur. He got a call from her stepson, John, at the big house. They were having a big party for a very special guest that was coming from Washington to go to the party by the name of Bulldog, which I found out later was J. Edgar Hoover. And he said he was very excited about doing this, going on this trip out to the airport to take this special guest to a very special party, big party. And I asked him when he came back if he got a good tip, and he said no, and he was very, very upset. He had to go back that night to take J. Edgar Hoover to the airport to go back to Washington. And he still didn't get a tip.
Further verification of Hoover's presence in Dallas on the eve of the assassination came from a friend of May's who worked at the Murchison family home.
Beulah May Holman, she was the cook at John and Lupe's house, and she wanted me to go help her that night, which I didn't, but I knew she told me she was cooking quail, and I wanted the recipe, so she gave it to me. She said there was a very important guest by the name of J. Edgar Hoover that was coming in, and I should go out and help her so I could get to meet him. If it was a film star, I probably would have gone, but I didn't know who he was. No, not at that time.
Early the next morning, only a few hours before the assassination, Madeline received a phone call from Johnson, who was back in Fort Worth with Kennedy.
Lyndon called me from the Texas hotel, and he was still irate. I said, "Lyndon, about last night," and he went to cursing. He used foul language all the time, and he said, "Those Kennedys," he repeated, "they will never embarrass me again. That's no threat, that's a promise." And I'd like the entire world to know how I personally feel is the fact Lyndon Johnson knew about the assassination and was a part of it.
You've been watching The Men Who Killed Kennedy, The Guilty Men, a program which presents just one of the many theories about the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
The Logitech cordless keyboard and mouse. No cords detached.
Full of a long prison sentence. Dallas was to become forever linked with the murder of the president. But the rich and powerful men who had met in secret the night before had everything to gain from his death. LBJ was fearful of a long prison sentence, J. Edgar Hoover of losing his job, and the oil men of losing millions of dollars. When the shots rang out on Elm Street the next day, those problems were solved.
Okay, I wanted to stop it and tell you this little known information. You have to really dig to find stuff like this. Do you guys remember the movie Mommy Dearest? Now think, this is Joan Crawford's life as told through the eyes of her daughter. I forget her name, but she didn't have any wire hangers. Let's put it that way. So in that movie, I believe either her husband died. He was the head of PepsiCo, right? And when he died, or he got sick, or something, had a divorce, and she got the company, whichever, she wound up being the CEO of that company, Pepsi, at this time. At this time. Okay. So in Dallas, there's this big corporate meeting for PepsiCo. Nixon was involved in that company as a huge stockholder or something along those lines. I don't want to get it wrong, so I don't want to guess, but it was something along those lines. So he's at the meeting. So is Crawford. So if you look back and you really dig, you can see some pictures, and I think there's a little bit of snippet of videos and some other things of Joan Crawford shaking Nixon's hand, and standing in the line, like you go by and you welcome everybody at the party. Hi, how you doing? And you're shaking hands. You see her in the same outfit, the actual Joan Crawford, in the outfit that she was wearing, the big pink hat and whatever else suit she was wearing. It was hideous. She's in that outfit that the actress playing her was wearing in the movie when she was standing at the table and she was telling everybody, listen, boys, I'm in charge now. If you remember that scene, and they were all just like, oh my gosh, this is going to be awful. I mean, she's a CEO, but she's at this meeting. Now, I do not know if she was at the party at the Murchisons. I do not know. But here's the thing. This party was given, everybody was there. Connolly, you got Nixon, like they said, Hoover, and a bunch of other people. They go into this room, according to Madeline Brown and other people there. When they come out, they start filing out. Apparently, Nixon was all sweaty and left. I don't think he had... Nixon's a whole nother thing. I think he knew. I don't think he had anything to do. He didn't stop it. But, I mean, how do you stop a freight train like that? I don't know. Stand up in the middle and start screaming. I don't know. But when they came out of that room, one of the first people Johnson saw was Madeline Brown, and he said to her what she said he said. There was one other witness that I believe backs her up, at least, that he was there, she was there, and he came out and talked to her, and then they hung around a little bit and left. The important thing is all the people were there at that meeting. When I was talking to Mark Shaw, I believe it was the second or third conversation I'd had with him, and all the episodes are on my YouTube channel. It's Mark Shaw, Spiderwebs, the Reporter Who Knew Too Much, JFK, Marilyn, and Dorothy. There's several episodes there. They're very good. Mark's an amazing guy. I told him in the conversation we were having that he needs to look into that party, because that's going to take him and splinter off into different areas. And I also told him about Marilyn. I said, you need to look into that, because that was fishy too. And she's connected to JFK, and she was connected to Dorothy Gale Gallen. They were all very deeply interested in UFOs, and people were getting together and they'd have cocktail parties. They talk about this stuff. They had time back then, apparently money and time, and plenty of time to screw each other over. I think that meeting is so important because the people that were in that room knew what was going on. And Hoover's in there. It backs up the conversations that we're getting now with things that are being released. First it was transcripts, and then, recordings and that kind of stuff all being released throughout this time of Hoover and LBJ having conversations. One of them being right after Oswald's grabbed out of the theater. You have your man. Pass it along. They had so much information on him. They weren't looking for anybody else. This was him, blah, blah, blah. All of this starts falling into place, this little house of cards they have. But that meeting and the people that were there and the fact that JFK fired Allen Dulles and 2 other heads of the CIA that were next in line resigned very soon after that. And Allen Dulles got thrown out of his office and went not too far away and set up a new one and never missed a beat. And you know that when you see the stuff that's coming. So incredible. I thought that was important. So if you really want to dig into it, that meeting right there, it's something.
The shock of Kennedy's assassination and its brutality reverberated around the world, but not everyone was grieving.
The mood in the Murchison family home was very joyous and happy for a whole week after, like champagne and caviar flew every day of the week. But I was the only one in that household at the time that felt any grief for his assassination.
After the president's murder, Hoover had absolute control of the cover-up. All the physical evidence relating to the crime was swiftly removed to Washington. From the beginning, Oswald was promoted as the lone nut assassin, but in LBJ's home state, tongues were wagging.
I met Lyndon on New Year's Eve at the Driscoll Hotel in Austin. And the people in Dallas, everyone was talking about Lyndon Johnson was the cause of the assassination, and it made my heart very heavy. I just couldn't believe that he could be a part of something so bad. And so I confronted Lyndon. I said, Lyndon, you've got to tell me, were you part of the assassination? And of course, he had a high temper fit, hit the wall, and he was very irate and angry. And he said, no, I was not, but the oil people, or he called them the fat cats of Texas that I knew, and the intelligence was the cause of the assassination. I am sure Lyndon did not make the plans per se, but he had the key people that he could call to actually do it.
If the head of the FBI and the head of the Secret Service and key lieutenants of those 2 figures are involved in covering up, plus the President of the United States and all his cronies, you don't need a massive conspiracy to get away with this.
After the assassination, Cliff Carter, Johnson's aide, made repeated calls from the White House to the district attorney in Dallas, Henry Wade. He was instructed to look no further than Oswald for the guilty man. There was no conspiracy. A similar call was made to the Attorney General of Texas, Wagner Carr.
Then we have Lyndon Johnson himself calling the chief of homicide, Will Fritz, who's really doing the dirt work as far as interrogating Oswald and trying to get to the bottom of this case. He calls him and tells him, you have your man. You have your man. Let it go at that. Lyndon Johnson is trying to control what is going on with the investigation of the assassination of President Kennedy from Washington, D.C., with crucial figures in the case.
The late Dr. Charles Crenshaw experienced the new president's controlling hand. He was in the operating theater at Parkland Hospital with his colleagues, working to save Oswald's life after Jack Ruby had shot him. He was urgently called to the phone in an adjoining office.
I picked up the phone, and it was there I heard this voice like thunder that stated, "This is the president, Lyndon B. Johnson." And he asked, "How is the accused assassin doing?" I was so startled. The thing that I could say was he's holding his own. He's lost a large amount of blood. He said, would you take a message to the chief operating surgeon? It was more of an order than a question. So I said, yes, sir. He said, there is a man in the room. I would like for him to take a deathbed confession. And all of a sudden, the phone went off. I returned to the operating room. I tapped Dr. Shires on the shoulder. He looked at me like, what are you talking about? Everyone was working feverishly in the abdomen trying to correct the wounds there. I said, guess who I've been talking to? I said, the President of the United States called and wants that man over there to take a deathbed confession. And Shires looked at me like I was crazy. And we both realized that there was no way Lee Harvey Oswald, had he survived, would have been able to give any testimony until 2 or 3 days after the procedure. But still in all, the president had called and I did relay the message.
When Dr. Crenshaw published his story in 1992, he suffered an avalanche of criticism. It was argued that Johnson made no such call. Crenshaw's critics were proved wrong by a former chief switchboard operator at Parkland Hospital, Phyllis Bartlett.
The call came in and said, hold the line for the president. And for a second, I couldn't, I was still thinking Kennedy, and I was kind of taken back for a minute, and then in a few seconds, it was just a matter of a second, he came on in a loud voice. He said, this is Lyndon Johnson. Connect me to the accused assassin's doctor. It sounded the same as it had been on newscasts when I would hear him speak. I knew I had put a call to the operating room, so I contacted Dr. Crenshaw and I told him, that I knew he did get the call and that I was sorry that the people had in the newspaper and on the TVs had tried to discredit him. And that was when I spoke out.
From the moment he became president, Johnson had authority over every aspect of the cover-up of Kennedy's murder. He was unassailable.
Johnson has the power to contain the investigation, both nationally and locally, on the ground in Texas. More so than if it had happened, let's say, in Oregon or Wisconsin. Texas. He's got the power to give the CIA what it wants as president, as opposed to Kennedy, who they feared. He's got the power to take the National Security Action Memorandum that Kennedy had signed in November of 1963, tear it up, reverse it, and create a war where 3 million soldiers wound up going to Vietnam instead of 16,000 being brought home by JFK. He can make J. Edgar Hoover director of the FBI for life. He's the man in the middle. The only person that can answer all of the questions of who's at risk, who's going to gain the most, who wins in this deal, there's only one answer to that question, and that's Lyndon Johnson. And his ticket out was Elm Street.
I agree.
You've been watching the men.
I totally agree.
Of the many theories about the death of John F. Kennedy.
One of the most compelling pieces of evidence linking Johnson with the assassination is through his henchman Malcolm Wallace, the convicted killer of Douglas Kinzer. In the hours following the assassination, on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository building by the southeast corner window, the Dallas police discovered an unidentified fingerprint.
The fingerprint is the ultimate part of the Mac Wallace story.
Good night, Henry.
The FBI fingerprinted every Texas School Book Depository employee, including the women employees that worked downstairs, never handled the boxes. They fingerprinted every Dallas officer that was in the sniper's nest so that they could remove those fingerprints from consideration. At the end of the day, you have one fingerprint remaining. It sits in the National Archives for 35 years.
Yep.
Until 1998.
Yep.
An investigator takes it to a highly qualified certified latent print examiner, CLPE, along with a redacted fingerprint card from Mac Wallace from the 1951 murder of John Douglas Kinzer. And he said, here's a print card. Do you see anything?
34-point
Nathan
match.
Darby is one of the most experienced fingerprint experts in the United States,
Mac
with
Wallace.
35 years service in the U.S. military and the City of Austin Police Department.
I didn't know where it came from. And a week or 10 days later, I called the party and said it brought it over and said, well, it's a match. The finger that made the ink print also made the latent. And we call that a match or identified. And there was no question about it. They matched.
3 years later, Nathan Darby readdressed the same evidence and reconfirmed his original findings.
When he was done, he had a 34-point match. And when you mention that in criminal circles to an investigator, how confident would you feel with a 34-point match? Oh, that's a slam dunk. It can't miss. It doesn't get any better than that. You give me a 34-point match on any case in the United States, I'll take it to court and win.
The inked and the latent print are made by the same finger. And the other evidence that I've been presented with was Malcolm Wallace's left little finger, without a reasonable doubt.
Now, the fingerprint in question came from a cardboard box in the sniper's nest in Texas School Book Depository.
There it is.
Fingerprints do not last long on cardboard. So it's fair to say that either Malcolm Wallace was wandering around there for no purpose. He was in that sniper's nest on November 22nd.
Yep.
That evidence, that fingerprint evidence, along with Malcolm Wallace's sordid resume, was sent to every imaginable agency or individual that could have an interest in what happened to John Kennedy. The only people that took notice of it were the Dallas police, because it's still an open homicide on their blotter. And they took serious notice of it. And then they were told, forward it up the line, because Dallas no longer has any evidence. It's all in federal hands, even though it's an unsolved homicide. They forwarded it up the line. And it took 18 months for the FBI to say verbally, no, it's not a match. And the single most important fingerprint found in the last 35 years was buried.
I don't know why they couldn't say that the thing didn't match. It did match. There's no question about it. My experience, I've just had too much experience. I know what I'm talking about. I'm positive. There's no question about it. My dying declaration, if I was to drop dead right now, they match.
There you go.
It's still the big lie. It's unknown. It's unidentified. No, it's identified. It's Malcolm Wallace, and he's linked to Estes, Carter, and Lyndon B. Johnson directly.
According to the official record, Malcolm Wallace died in a single car accident on this lonely stretch of Texas highway on the night of January 7th, 1971. There were no witnesses. His body was taken to a local hospital where he was pronounced dead. He was buried here close to other family members. 8 months later, another key member of LBJ's inner circle, presidential aide Cliff Carter, died unexpectedly. But shortly before his death, he met with Billy Solestes.
They discuss all these murders that Cliff Carter is knowledgeable about. Now, Billy knows about some of them, but Cliff knows about more, and he fills him in on all the details. Malcolm Wallace being a central figure in most of these murders. And there are over 17 murders that Carter tells Estes about. And he actually tells Estes that he fears for his own life. And within 2 days' time, he's dead.
Johnson's attorney, Edward Clark, was one person who prospered. But when LBJ was brought low by the Vietnam War and decided not to run for a second term, Clark felt shortchanged for his role in the assassination, according to his legal partner, Barr McClellan.
He expected $8 million spread over 8 years, over the 2 terms Johnson was to serve. When those terms were cut short by Johnson's sudden and unexpected resignation, Clark was $4 million short. was not a man to be denied. When he had done a service, he was going to be paid. Planning ahead, he went to Big Oil and Big D, went to Clint Murchison to say, look, I've done y'all a great service. I deserve more. I'm going to get it. Murchison agreed with him and suggested he file for a well in the middle of the great East Texas oil field. He called me in as his personal attorney to make the first bid for getting that money. And he was not successful in getting $4 million, but he got his $2 million. So when all was said and done, Clark realized $6 million for the assassination of John Kennedy.
Barr McClellan believes documentary proof of these dark deeds lies in the Johnson-Clark legal records. For many years, they were kept in a high-security area above the Clark offices, known as the penthouse.
Any of us attorneys could get into the general area, but the secret area, the Johnson area, was locked off, accessible to no one. I have a strong belief that there are substantial records somewhere that show this conspiracy and its both evolution, its execution, and its cover-up. But I don't know where they'd be. We need to see them.
Johnson was ultimately consumed by the high office he had so unscrupulously striven for. A broken man, he retreated to his Texas ranch, where his lawyers were to secretly summon a psychiatrist to deal with his deepening depression.
An immediate concern at the law firm was that he would say too much. The $1 million was available to the psychiatrist to keep anything from coming out. The one reason for all these protections was the greatest demon that was dogging Johnson at the time, and that was the assassination of John Kennedy and the role he played in it. We had to keep it covered up, and for sure we had to keep the psychiatrist muzzled, and we did. But if any one set of records needs to be produced, the psychiatric records should be disclosed to the American public, because they will, I am confident, disclose his role in the assassination.
Only 4 years after leaving office, Johnson died. But there are those living who are still afraid to come forward to tell what they know about the guilty men.
People are afraid of him dead. He's been dead since 1973, and his shadow still casts fear in this country, especially in Texas.
Undaunted, across the nation, the questioning voice of the American people will not be silenced. An overwhelming majority refuse to accept their government's version of what happened in Dallas on November the 22nd, 1963.
There's no statute of limitations on murder.
There you go.
If they're still continuing to cover it up in 20 more years, that's obstruction of justice. It's a conspiracy. The men who killed Kennedy don't end with the people who pulled triggers. It should be important to all of us that we get to the bottom of this.
Just as John Kennedy's car took an incredible turn when it went on to Elm Street, 300 feet later, our form of government, our way of life, our way of respecting our government, our way of being respected by our government, took that same kind of bizarre wide turn. And we haven't gotten back on the straight and narrow yet.
The Kennedy assassination was the end of faith in government. And so it's up to the little man to fight the odds. Davy Crockett, Sisyphus pushing his rock. Someone has to keep fighting the odds. And even though you know the chances are that you're never going to get a resolution to what you're fighting for, you have to fight for it anyway. Just the principle of justice. Just the principles of American democracy. Don't give up. Keep fighting.
The principle of the thing.
This episode has presented one viewpoint. We have also presented many other theories in numerous programs. For the History Channel, I'm Steve Gillen.
Thank you, Steve. We appreciate you. I agree with those gentlemen that this is something that you don't let go. Why is it important? For all the reasons. There's no statute of limitation on murder. It doesn't matter that the people that were involved are gone. We know as a group here, everything that we study, that you are accountable when you get to wherever you're going. I often think about it. I know it sounds crazy, but I've thought of, more than once what Johnson was met with when he crossed. He was such people have such an idea of what he was, but when you dig down, and you didn't have to dig too hard, scratch much more than the surface. This was a man that you'd go to his ranch, you'd get in his Cadillac convertible, whatever it was, and he'd race the Secret Service men around and play chicken, head toward the lake, and dare somebody to get scared and jump out of the vehicle. He said, "You're gonna let your president drown? What's wrong with you?" I mean, he would degrade people all day long. It's been my experience, and this is just me, that people who have to degrade other people are low themselves, and they have to make someone else feel bad to make themselves feel better. That's not a characteristic of someone you want running the country, someone you want running you, someone you want in any kind of power whatsoever, but power positions are filled with them. So the more we dig on LBJ, and listen, we're not just picking on him. He was involved. There's very little doubt. And the reason I showed you this is because reaching out to this, as much as they wanted to spell it, we put out many theories and everything else. Well, again, threads. Just keep that thread in there. We'll look at some other threads as we go along. But the LBJ thread is a very prominent and very thick, brightly colored son of a bitch. It stands out, and there's no way you can get around it. You've got Mac Wallace's fingerprint on a box. Fingerprints do not last long on cardboard. So we've got his little pinky. What was he doing up there, right? Before we go tonight, 2 other short things I want to show you. All right, 3 short things and we're out. Okay. Gosh, let me find them. Help me find them. Oh, the saints of podcasting, help me sort this. Okay, this one, pretty sure. Okay, we'll go here. And I will find it here. Okay. I'm already in. Hang on, bear with me. I'll find it. Stephen Miller. I love Stephen Miller. You'll get to know Stephen Miller on my other show. He's one of my favorite characters. Oh, there's my professor. I didn't tell you guys. This is, if you want good, solid, the man you're looking at right there is my professor. I can say that because I'm taking these courses online. I know the free courses online, but I'm taking Citizenship and Its Decline and World War II history from this gentleman, who's one of the smartest minds I've ever met. His name is Victor Davis Hanson, and he, he's wonderful. What a mind. He gets it. He really does. He's so good. Okay, back to the subject. Sorry for that detour there, but I'm just so proud of him. Okay, what I wanted to show you is the reason I picked that doc to show you is because everything in that documentary, I can't find one thing that has not stood the test of time and has been disproven or thrown out. It's only been solidified by the new JFK files coming out now in so many ways. And there are very few prominent JFK researchers that would argue with that information you just saw. Nobody's come out and, they might say, "Oh, Madeline Brown's crazy. Why would you believe her? She was an old, whore and all this." Well, listen, she had her son, Stephen. She was given checks for a very long time. LBJ always denied the son. He even went to court. They tried to fight him on it. LBJ didn't show up, but it was thrown out of court. And when he walked in there, he looked just like a cutout copy of LBJ. It was hard to deny him. They didn't do DNA and things like that back then. So listen to this. This just came out in the new JFK files, a lot of audio as well. And here's what.
Good to see you. How's life treating you today?
Start over. This is a conversation.
Good to see you. How's life treating you today? Well, Saul, it's been a pretty touch and go situation. Linda and I have had quite a few unpleasant words here lately over the deal with that he hired Mike Wallace to assassinate the president. It's been hectic in every way, but we've lived through it this far. I guess we'll continue to do so. Lyndon should have never issued that order to Mike. But we've had our differences, and I'm a true blue to Lyndon, as I've always been, and tried to carry out every order that he's ever given me. But this is one I'll probably never be able to forget. And the times that we've had in Texas, and the embarrassment that Lyndon had gotten from Kennedy, I guess there wasn't anything else to do but what he did. Well, you know, Lyndon could have really hit me if he would. Well, Lyndon's the kind of person that doesn't want to help anyone. He's all for Lyndon, and that's the way he's pretty much always been. Well, they had me backed up on that Henry Marshall killing, and they just, it's sure good to see you. How's life? It's sure good to see you. How's life treating you today?
Well, there you have it. And again, this is stuff that's coming out just recently in some of the huge dump of JFK files. So when people tell you there's nothing in there, some people don't know what to look for. I didn't find this on my own. Everybody's talking about it. I'm not taking any kind of credit for it. All I'm saying is don't believe when people are coming up or clickbait or whatever, telling you guys that there's nothing or everything points to this or that. This is just scratching the surface. From what you've seen tonight, this is a pretty doggone strong case for this should have been under investigation. Obviously a cover-up. It goes along with Oliver Stone saying that LBJ was involved in the cover-up, obviously. I mean, he's gone that far. And there was a confusion with Bobart she got Oliver Stone and Roger Stone confused because Roger Stone wrote a book about LBJ not only being involved in the cover-up, but complicit and involved very strongly in the killing of JFK, the setting it up. Again, you have to ask yourself who had the power, who profited from it, and who could pull it off. He knew everybody in Dallas, all of his friends. He knew the governor. I mean, they're best friends. They could pull this off, and everybody was afraid of him. Now, did he get Mike Wallace? And Mike Wallace, he did his part, and then you had maybe the mafia guys over here, and maybe somebody coming from out of the country over here, and maybe somebody over here in this building, and then you've got this. I would say yes. Big oil behind it, putting up money for it, giving the go-ahead. You heard that at the Markinson's house for the whole week, they were having caviar and champagne, celebrating the death of the president. So that also brings in Hoover, the head of the FBI, who had the power, who could cover it up. The conversations that they had, we'll talk about that on another episode. And more that is drawn into this deep, dark story. Like I said, it's this dark hallway with many doors. We're going to open some doors. We're going to leave some cracked open. This one we're going to leave cracked open. There's a lot of shadows in that hallway. Those shadows are people. JFK was not the only one killed. It started a roller coaster, a domino effect of witnesses. Lee Harvey Oswald, Ruby, eventually, so many others. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the book called Hit List, written by Richard Belzer. Even now, if you look it up on AI today and ask about his theory on his hit list of people that died mysteriously, maybe shot 5 times in the back of the head with a bolt action rifle, those kind of suicides, things like that. It'll tell you it's all bunk because he was a comedian and who would take him seriously. AI still says that. But there's more to the story. I believe his book was where I first really started hearing about Dorothy Kilgallen and what she was doing. Again, does everything, ricochet off of her? No, I would say no, but I don't think you should throw her out. I don't think Marilyn should be thrown out. I think everything should be taken in because all of it creates this picture, this tapestry. Every thread creates this tapestry and this picture. And if we don't look at it like that, we're going to make the same mistakes we made before and start focusing on one thing or one character, not even just focusing on LBJ, but everything that surrounded each one of these people. We need the biggest whiteboard ever, the biggest ball of red string, a stack of Post-it notes, and lots of pictures of every character that's in here. The best thing I can tell you, again, is look into these people. Eugenio, Mark Grobert. Get you a smattering, a sampling of each, and weigh it back on the information that you just got. That pretty much covered quite a bit of it. But then when you take in the Garrison stuff from New Orleans, and you take in the Dorothy Kilgallen, go in and talking to the people in New Orleans about the organized crime there, Marcello, you bring in the Gambinos, you bring in the Big Oil, you bring in all the different lettered agencies, you bring in the Secret Service and how they were the night before and how they were hung over the next morning because they were at, I think they started at the Carousel and then went to Little Caesars. And I'm not talking about a pizza place. I'm talking about a place that was run by Cubans. Can't make this stuff up. And drinking moonshine, hanging out with strippers. I think 3 of them lost their Secret Service ID. I think they lost 2 guns went missing. Well, I'll get all the details. I don't want to guess, but it was such a mess. It was such a mess. So yeah, even they were on it. You can see them on the video where one of the Secret Service guys tries to get on the vehicle like they're supposed to block the president, and he's waved off by another Secret Service guy, and he's going, "What? What do you mean? What are you doing?" That everything in the Zapruder film is important, but you can't count on the fact that it wasn't chopped up because there's frames missing. And there's other films. And there's a film right now still being held supposedly by NBC that have been sitting on for quite a long time that supposedly shows Lee Harvey Oswald standing outside on the sidewalk in front of the school book depository while the motorcade went by. I can assure you, they didn't want you to see that. So, what are we ending this with? I told you it was a roller coaster and a domino effect. I told you that Hit List is a very good book. I believe it has 50 victims in it. Of people very close to the inner workings of this day in Dallas, whether they were witnesses, whether they were part of it, where they were just going over the bridge and they saw something and then told people that they saw something, the puff of smoke in the grassy knoll, the people that walked away. There's 2 witnesses that saw a man walk away from it, take a gun apart, put it inside of an electrical box and walk away. You've got the tramps, which again, I think that was either backup or a red herring. I'm not sure there, but there's so many things. The babushka lady, the umbrella guy, the 2 guys with the radios that sat down, so much stuff. So this is how we're ending it. There is a movie, if you'd like to see it until we get to our next episode. It's called Executive Action. It was put out in 1973. It's on and off the inner tubes, but right now it is on there for free. And it ends with, I'm just going to show you the very last part, because it shows the arrogance of those that were behind and knew it was going to happen, or getting the phone calls and saying this has happened, he's off of Parkland, the deed's done, that kind of stuff, and they're just being arrogant about the whole thing. And then they have somebody that's having a hard time, and they know they're a loose cannon, so they just had them killed too, and just keep the body there, and we'll move it. I'll give you further instructions later. And it's just so methodical and jaded the way they're doing it, and you can just imagine that's how it was behind the scenes. And at the end, it shows something very profound, and I wanted to show it to you. I wanted to tell you about the movie. It's a good movie. It's worth the watch. It's got a lot of good people in it. It's not exactly how it went down, but I think a small part of it, one of the threads that is in this tapestry, probably went very much like the movie is putting it down. But I wouldn't follow it as far as names and saying this person actually went here and met at that diner and met this guy and talked to him, because this was done in probably early 70s. It was put out in 73, so written and put out, 70-ish. It's not far from the assassination date. So it's, again, one of those things that might have some information in it, like the last thing we watched, that it's been lost to time. So it's important to watch. One of the things that has been lost to time and not spoken about much is the hit list. The amount of people that passed because some people with money and power wanted it to be this way. And we just got through something that could have changed everything, that was handled very similar. Mark my words, we'll see it uncovered. But it was also everybody in the Vietnam War, all the broken hearts, the broken dreams, the broken people, in several different lands. And this went on behind the scenes, and nobody talks about it. So we're going to end our show with it tonight. This is Executive Action. The last few minutes ends very profound.
He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot. There's the man with absolute panic here in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters. Detectives have their guns drawn. Oswald has been shot. Stay with me here. Sorry, I can't tell you that. Would you be willing to say, with all this evidence, that it is now beyond a reasonable doubt at all that Oswald was the killer of President Kennedy?
I would say that without any doubt, he's the killer. The law says beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty, there's no question that he was the killer of President Kennedy.
That case is closed in your mind.
As far as Oswald's concerned, yes.
It's so unlikely, I don't see how anyone can believe it.
Everyone will believe it. They want to believe it. They have to. People, the government, everyone.
Even his brother? He's the Attorney General, for God's sake.
True. But he's not thinking as Attorney General tonight. He's grieving for a murdered brother. By the time his grief subsides, all the power will have passed. It'll be too late.
Yes? That's right.
Hold the body there. Make arrangements in the morning. That's right, thank you. Good night. That was Tim. James Farrington. Heart attack. Parkland Hospital.
Watch this. 1973, they had this count already.
In the 3 years after the murders of President Kennedy and Lee Harvey Oswald, 18 material witnesses died, 6 by gunfire, 3 in motor accidents, 2 by suicide, 1 from a cut throat, 1 from a karate chop to the neck, 3 from heart attacks, and 2 from natural causes. An actuary engaged by the London Sunday Times concluded that on November 22, 1963, the odds against these witnesses being dead by February 1967 were 100,000 trillion to 1.
Well, there you go, folks. The forgotten. You know, when they say that a man was shot that day, the country was kneecapped. And many people died. And many people died after and needlessly in a war that we were about to be pulling out of. So for every person that ever carried a sign or wore a peace sign or a flower in their hair or tuned in and tuned out, all of that was because some powerful people got really greedy and thought they were gods. Well, we haven't forgotten. I certainly haven't. And I heard today 3 guys were talking on a podcast about this and about the files and what they thought, and some of their ideas weren't so bad. I was, hanging in there. And then they started talking about the apathy around the whole thing. It's like, yeah, but nobody cares. So what, Dude, it's still going on. And if we don't look it right in the ugly eye, because when you're walking down that dark hallway and you're looking in these doors, there's shadows in the hallway, are all these people that died because somebody picked up the phone and said, do it. In this case, several of them. They went along with it. Oh, let's join the party. It's awful. And I think it's terrible the way we've gotten to where we can just talk about it like it didn't matter. We don't ever do that on this show, not with true crime or anything else. I try not to exploit, the people the victims, Lizzie Borden. And I think it's awful people get their picture taken on the couch. But this one takes the cake because, ladies and gentlemen, it's still going on. We got the brakes hit. We got the emergency brakes on right now. We're coming out of it and we're exposing it. But please don't let it be forgotten. Please don't look at it like it's nothing. Pass the word along. Pass the word along that papers are coming out now that Hitler didn't kill himself and they went to Argentina and he lived for another 20-something years. We've been saying this forever. And we just want the truth. We just want the truth. Let's change some of those names. People like changing names? Let's take some of these names we've been honoring, people like Dulles Airport. That man was just as complicit in this, in my opinion. But who am I? I'm just an American who read the Declaration of Independence, and I believe every word. The Bill of Rights, I've stood and defended it. And that president was not a perfect man, but when the chips were down, he was a hero. And he was trying to stop a war. I think he was in above his head, Poor man thought he was president. I know another one that's pushed just as hard for all the same reasons. Got same places pushing. So say a prayer there too, if you wouldn't mind. For the country and for each other. For everybody that's hurting tonight or worried, keep your spirits up. It's good that all this is coming out. We need to get lots of sunshine. Call it what it is. Stop fighting amongst each other about, which way the threads go. Let's take a step back, look at all of it together. Keep the facts and get rid of the feelings. And then we can grieve as a country together and swear we'll never allow this to happen again. Thank you for being here tonight. I love you all. And sorry we went a little late, but I wanted to get that much in. It does not 100% cover LBJ, but I would like to reiterate that everything we saw in that short documentary is still good today. And taking that into consideration as your baseline, you can take on the rest of it and pull on some more threads and get a better picture, because we all deserve the truth. And so does JFK and every life that was touched afterwards. Love you all. Good night. See you for tomorrow night's movie. I haven't gotten a full decision on it because I want to make sure I've got a clear copy, but it'll more than likely be one of the three that I mentioned. The Presence, I'd love to show that. It's a little draggy at first, but once she starts going, so I was kind of trying to look for What Lies Beneath to see if I can get you that one. It's a little more fast paced. It's also a great ghost story. So it'll be a surprise tomorrow night. Hope to see you tomorrow night, 8:30. I always try to give Lee a little time so he can finish with his music and people can come over and don't miss the first part of the movie. So that's why I do that. Hope to see you tomorrow night, only on Rumble. Thank you for being here tonight. Let's dance our way out of here. Kick your shoes off. Think of JFK tonight. Nobody deserves that. Oop, that's the wrong one. That gummit. Hold on. We're not going out like that. Same color blue. Let me fix this. Yeah, let's say a little prayer for JFK tonight. I hate that his name keeps getting drugged through. Like it's nothing. So maybe say an extra little happy thoughts and energy his way. To try to make up for it if we only could, right? Here we go. Good night, everybody. Hit the like on the way. Thank you.